Ohio, the seventh most populated state in the United States, it has seen much change over the decades. From a Rust Belt powerhouse of manufacturing to a more service-based economy, populations have seen many shifts and losses throughout. While the state as a whole has not seen any losses of late, despite its Rust Belt past, there have been massive population losses in particular cities, however, leaving them heavily vacated for a variety of reasons, and in this video we will cover them. These are 5 of the most vacated cities in Ohio. First, we will start with the largest of them on this list, and that is Cleveland. Cleveland has lost 60.1% of its population since its peak in the 1950 census, at which time it had nearly 915,000 people. In 1920, it was the 5th largest city in America and would see its growth off of a variety of industries such as oil refining through John D. Rockefeller, steel production, and the auto industry. The city's growth would, however, not continue after 1950, and it has lost population every decade since, due to factors such as outsourcing, deindustrialization, and suburbanization. So many had left by the 2000s that the city would tear down 8,000 homes from 2007 to 2014, and hundreds more abandoned buildings around the same period. While there has been quite a bit of investment and revitalization in its downtown and certain neighborhoods such as Ohio City, Tremont, and University Circle, there are vast amounts of land in the city that consist of urban prairies, brownfields, and abandoned buildings, showcasing the fact that this city was once much larger than it is today. Next we have Portsmouth, Ohio. This city, located on the southern end of the state on the Ohio River by the Kentucky border, has lost 57.1% of its population since its peak in 1930. Portsmouth grew off of its location being at the southern terminus of the Ohio and Erie Canal and off of iron and steel. The canal would be gone by the early 1900s, however the city's population would continue to grow all the way through 1930. Even though it would start to decline afterward, there were still at least 3,800 steel jobs at Portsmouth Steel by the mid-20th century. The area and plant was still attractive enough even by the 1950s that Detroit Steel, who would now own Portsmouth Steel, invested $150 million, equivalent to roughly $2 billion in today's dollars, into the Portsmouth area plant. The plant, however, would not last, as declining demand and outsourcing of domestic steel would ultimately do the plant in 1980, with 1,200 job losses occurring. What was left of the complex in its coke production ended in 2002 with 200 more job losses. Today you are left with a city that, though it was never huge, is much smaller than what it was. Next we have East Cleveland. East Cleveland has lost 66.5% of its population since its peak in 1950. East Cleveland is the oldest suburb of Cleveland and would be quite prosperous in its early years. John D. Rockefeller would have a home there, and the city would grow by roughly tenfold in population from 1900 to 1920. Aside from this, the city would attract much development in the form of education, housing, and industry, no doubt a reflection of the city's wealth and access to railroads during and around this time period. It would stay around 40,000 in population from 1930 to 1970. However, in the 1960s, the city would succumb to the effects of white flight, largely influenced by real estate industry-induced panic selling or blockbusting over demographic changes. Over the 70s and 80s, the population would decline some. However, from the 90s forward, the losses would become extreme. GE, the city's main employer, would wind down operations over the years, going from 5,700 employees in the mid-90s to just around 250 as of 2022. Population, job, and income declines within the city would take their toll, and the city was not able to adapt quickly enough. It has been in severe financial distress for much of the last roughly 40 years, and by the early 2000s, unpaid property taxes numbered over $7 million. The city's financial issues, combined with the job losses, combined with a severe drop in the amount the city would receive in income taxes no doubt have contributed to the continuing cycle of losses, as the city is roughly half the size it was just 25 years ago. Hundreds upon hundreds of homes have been torn down in recent years. However, the level of abandonment here is still very much visible throughout. Next we have East Liverpool. This city, located by the southern end of the PA border with Ohio and the tip of the northern West Virginia panhandle, grew heavily off the pottery industry. It was a huge producer of it from the late 19th through the first half of the 20th century, and 7,000 jobs in the industry existed in East Liverpool in the 1920s. Steel would have a major impact in East Liverpool, with Crucible Steel having a major plant just a few miles away in Pennsylvania. East Liverpool would have a stable population in the 20,000s for much of the 20th century, largely due to this. However, the 1970s would be when the declines would begin. East Liverpool would go from having as many as 85 producers of pottery in its heyday to just 3 today, due to foreign offerings, obsolescence, and aging infrastructure. What was the Crucible Steel plant would go from having as many as 7,500 workers at one point to changing hands several times, dwindling in employment, and eventually closing completely in 2016, at which point it had only 250 workers left due to a combination of declining profitability and overseas competitors. From 1970 to today, over 16,000 people have left East Liverpool, as there's simply not enough nearby populated areas to support large amounts of jobs. Finally, we have Youngstown. Youngstown lost 65.2% of its population from its peak in 1930. Youngstown would grow off of the steel industry, and at one point it would be among the top 3 in U.S. manufacturing of it. While its population peaked all the way back in 1930, its population would stay relatively flat through 1960, staying around 167 to 170K. It would be, however, in the 70s and 80s that the city's steel companies would be the city's undoing. Just in one day alone in 1977, Black Monday would result in the loss of 5,000 jobs when Youngstown Sheet and Tube's Campbell Works would end production. Youngstown would lose other large steel producers in U.S. Steel and Republic in the following years. Tens of thousands of jobs were lost in this era, and the city would lose 45,000 residents, or about a third of its 1970 population just from 1970 to 1990. The city would become so vacated that home demolitions numbered 7,000 in total from 2007 to 2024, as its population declines still have not ceased as of 2024, though they have greatly leveled off with service-based jobs and some manufacturing remaining. Ohio has seen a lot of change as a state in terms of business and industry and its populations. While these cities have seen declines, the state as a whole has remained resilient to population losses, and it remains to be seen where it goes from here. Thank you for watching.